Blood of the Dawnwalker is an upcoming single-player open-world RPG made by Rebel Wolves, a studio comprised of more than 100 devs that formerly worked at CDPR on the Witcher franchise. And the project has been led by none other than Konrad Tomaskiewicz, who was also the game director for Witcher 3 and its subsequent expansions as well. Suffice it to say, Blood of the Dawnwalker is a game that has a ton of Witcher DNA running through its design, and today we'll be looking at basically everything that you currently need to know about the game. And while this video will be fairly short, remember to subscribe because I will be covering this game in more detail the more we find out about it. Before I start narrating, however, because of the limited amount of actual in-game footage we have, for now I'll just have some of the official footage playing in the background. I apologize. But first and foremost, what is the Blood of the Dawnwalker? Well, as previously mentioned, it's a third-person action RPG in the same vein as the Witcher games. It's set in 14th century Europe, and you play as Cohen, a young man who's trying to save his little sister Lunka from what seems to be a king and his soldiers. You see, Lunka is infected with a plague that has spread throughout their country, and it's by decree of this king that everyone infected by the plague be put down by the sword. Thankfully, the siblings are saved by the sudden appearance of vampires that proceed to slaughter the king and his men, with the vampire leader, Brensis, saving Lunka's life by feeding her with his own blood, which presumably turns her into a vampire as well. That said, the vampires in Blood of the Dawnwalker might seem like the good guys from the recent cinematic trailer, but that's far from the truth. In fact, the vampire lord Brensis and his vampire coven will serve as the main antagonists of the game. For a so far unnamed reason, he's holding Cohen and Lunka's family hostage with plans to sacrifice them in the span of 30 days and 30 nights, and it's your job to build Cohen into a mighty monster hunter capable of saving his family before time runs out. And that takes us to my first, well, maybe not doubt, but slight worry I personally have for this game. You see, the 30 days and 30 nights I just mentioned is an actual in-game mechanic. Now, according to the developers, the timer will not be real time, but time will still be a precious resource somehow in one way or another. And if I had to hazard a guess, it'll most likely be missions-based, where after a set amount of missions, your day is over, and you now have to proceed to the night portion of the 24-hour window. Again, it's impossible to say how this will work right now, but we'll find out more later this year. Now, Cohen gains unique abilities depending on whether it's night or daytime. For example, when it's daytime, Cohen will mostly slay his enemies by using a sword and other human weaponry. But during the night, he gains access to supernatural abilities such as those of vampires. Some additional gameplay information we've learned is that just like any good RPG and just like The Witcher 3 before it, Blood of the Dawnwalker will feature a slew of characters that you can befriend, and there will be a big focus on choice and consequence, as well as on other traditional RPG mechanics, like building Cohen into a strong character. Now, according to one of the writers, Ariana Sierkiewicz, Cohen will also need to feed on blood relatively frequently as to keep his hunger down. And surprisingly, if you don't feed Cohen with enough blood, it's even possible for him to kill and eat his closest allies and friends. Which to me sounds reminiscent of the dark urge from Baldur's Gate 3, whereas if you don't feed the urge to murder, some truly dark stuff can happen completely out of your control. Now, this detail alone really piqued my interest with this game, as a mechanic like this could result in some absolutely crazy playthroughs filled with both tears and hilarity. On the other hand, I could also see players getting frustrated with mechanics such as these, including the apparent 30-day limit, but then again, it probably sounds worse than it actually is. Now, according to the game director, the devs wanted complete and total freedom with this game, and that also translates to what they want us as players to feel too. For example, side quests are supposedly not treated differently than the main quest, and Rebel Wolves are working on making the game as multifaceted as possible when it comes to characters and stories, which I'm personally obviously very much looking forward to because I appreciate strong character arcs and character stories that are just as strong as the main quest itself. Some additional details we've learned is that Cohen will be fighting against 4 additional vampire lords as he works to free his family, and we will essentially be destabilizing the vampire regime by killing each of these lords. However, vampires will not be the only enemies Cohen faces off against in the game, as thanks to the vampires taking over the Vale the game is set in, creatures such as undead, kobolds, and other creatures have taken up residence throughout the land. And while these will most likely serve as additional enemy types, it sounds like we'll be able to engage with them in different ways as well. As an example, kobolds apparently trade with humans every now and then, so not all monsters will be immediately hostile. Now, as I briefly mentioned before, Blood of the Dawnwalker will apparently be almost entirely open-ended, meaning that depending on what quests you pick and what factions and characters you engage with, your playthrough will look entirely different from, say, your friends. At least that's what they say. Hopefully this means that we can expect narrative choices with the same depth of games like Baldur's Gate 3, Witcher 3, and Cyberpunk, but hey, we'll have to wait and see. For now though, Blood of the Dawnwalker looks like it could be a very memorable RPG, and I'm very excited to see more as time goes on. As mentioned earlier, the only thing that has me a little bit concerned is the 30-day time mechanic, but again, I'd wager that it sounds worse than it actually is. But that's gonna have to do it for today. Again, I'll be covering Blood of the Dawnwalker as time goes on, so remember to subscribe for any kind of news updates related to this game. This has been Mr. Holton, signing out.